Because I've just financialized the problem, and you've just become more trouble than you're worth. The girl says you're going to do the job. You said that before. Why now? What is it all of a sudden? Everybody needs money. That's why they call it money.
Welcome to Money Unplugged. I'm Chris Hill. Thanks for being here. If you're new to the show, click the follow button on your podcast app so you don't miss an episode. And by all means, feel free to scroll through the back catalog. There's more than 60 episodes, and these are evergreen. So the conversations that I had last year with Morgan Housel, Dan Pink, Becky Quick, David Gardner, Allison Fergale, among others, they are just as relevant today as they were a year ago. I mentioned a few weeks back that April is Financial Literacy Month, and to bring it to a close, I can't think of anyone more appropriate than my guest this week, Brian Stoffel. He's the co-founder of Long-Term Mindset, a financial education company. But once upon a time, he was a middle school teacher who spent years actively running away from money because he associated the pursuit of money with losing something more important. He loved teaching and only stumbled into investing out of sheer boredom. And out of that experience, which he talks about, the trajectory of his professional life completely changed. And we had a great conversation, and it includes Brian talking about the types of companies he likes to invest in and how best-selling author Nassim Taleb influenced his thinking. So let's get into it with Brian Stoffel. What's the first memory you have when it comes to money?
I mean, they're all bad, but I'll put it in perspective when I say all bad. I feel like when I was growing up, I had this somewhat idyllic kind of scenario up until high school, like same group of friends. It was a very diverse group. We had mandatory busing in Milwaukee County. So it was a very diverse group of friends, came from all over. How much you had, the way I remember it didn't matter that much. I don't know if I went back and looked if that would check out 100%, but when we got to high school, then all of a sudden, just kind of the way that my peers and myself started going about life changed. And what I mean by that is like your grades started to matter so much more. And the pressure was just so high. And as I just kept thinking about, well, why is this so different than everything I've experienced before this? It all kept coming back to, well, because you need a good job to get lots of money. And I was like, well, okay, but we were all feeling pretty good about life before we started worrying about all this. So maybe that's not so great. So, I mean, the thing to know about me is that I took one mandatory econ class as a senior in high school because it was mandatory. But between then and when I graduated college, I didn't have a single econ class, a single finance class. I was actively doing everything I could to run away from pursuing money. I was a middle school public teacher. Like I don't know if there's many professions you can go into where you're going to have a lot of work and not get paid as much as you're putting in than that. So it was bad because I had this experience where I associated it with chasing after something to your own detriment.
Was money talked about in the house? Like, was it something that your parents would talk to you about at all?
Not really. My mom was a professor at the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee. My dad owned a small business. We definitely did not have as many bells and whistles as other families, but we were not struggling by any stretch of the imagination. And honestly, the biggest thing that we had was there was this long-standing agreement that we will help you go to college, but you get cut off at the end of your junior year. And that includes paying for college. So you have to pay for everything after your junior year. But I honestly don't remember much more other than my dad always said, whatever you think something is going to cost and however long you think it's going to take, double both of those numbers. And that served me well.
Did you ever ask them why they made the decision after the junior year? Was it just to sort of like, hey, to ease you into adulthood post-college, you get the last year of college all to yourself, and that includes the money.
Yeah, and I think that's what it was. I don't remember. I'm sure. I bet you that there was a time where they sat down and explained the thinking behind that. I don't remember that, but there was never any ambiguity as to why we're doing this. It was like, because you need to be responsible for something after college hits, because then, we're not here to get you out of trouble with that. You need to make smart decisions.
What was the first job you had when you were a kid?
When I was a kid, I mowed lawns a lot, and I was an umpire. So I loved that job. I was a little league umpire, and then when I was in college, I would umpire both little league and high school baseball games. That was a really fun job.
It was?
I loved it. And I think part of it, now, we do need to build some context in here. So starting at the little league, our little league, the fans, especially some of the parents, would get out of control. But at the time, my dad was also the president of the Little League. So I knew that if anything happened, he had my back. And so when those parents started mouthing off, I had the confidence to be like, you can leave or the game's over. And I knew he'd have my back because it was a problem in our Little League. And that's a lot of power to wield for a late teenager. So absolutely. I was drunk on power there.
I had a friend, a guy I went to high school with, and we were on the basketball team together, and same grade. His father was a basketball referee. And when we were seniors in high school, he became a referee and had to take whatever exam you have to take. And because of that, knew all these obscure rules. And a couple of times it came into play our senior season, where like other teams were doing things that were illegal, but the rule was so obscure, only he knew it. So like he had to explain it to the coach, and then the coach had to explain it to the referees.
It's a secret power.
It is a secret power. Let's move on to college. You went to Grinnell?
I did. I started at Ithaca College in New York, 3 semesters there, and then I went to Grinnell College. And I know you're a basketball fan, Chris. So I'm just going to say, because our history goes back to the Motley Fool between you and I got into rule breaker investing because of the Grinnell basketball team.
Because of the coach?
Yeah. I mean, we were in the middle of rural Iowa, a town of 9,000 people. And during the winter, the only form of entertainment, or I should say the only form of legal entertainment that we had was going to the Grinnell College basketball games. And I went to games where they scored 170 points.
So my connection to your school and your basketball team and your coach is he played his college basketball in my hometown of Waterville, Maine. He played at Colby College. And when I was at the Final Four in 2007, I ended up at a big dinner with 20 other people, that sort of thing. And he was there. And I did not bug him with lots of questions. But, for those people who are listening and wondering, what are you talking about? Little Grinnell College, the basketball team, was the highest scoring college basketball team in the country for years, because of this innovative offense that Dave Arsenault, that's his name, right?
Dave Arsenault, yep.
Yeah.
Shoot a 3 every 12 seconds. You know what my favorite one is for anyone who knows sports? They would set picks after they shot the 3. So think about that. You're not setting a pick to open up a shot. You set the pick after the 3 because they did the math and figured out if you miss the 3, then the chance of you making the next one, if you take it within 5 seconds, is like 50% higher. So they'd have 3 people crash the boards, set a pick after the 3, and it worked.
At Grinnell, you got a degree in English. Do I have that right?
English, psychology, and education. Those last 2 were like minors.
At what point did you know that you wanted to be a teacher?
Oh, when I was in high school.
Yeah, I was going to say, it seems like you must have been in high school or maybe just your first year of college.
Yeah.
So is that what you're doing right out of school?
Yep. I did my student teaching in rural Iowa, and then I worked at an alternative high school in rural Iowa. But then it was time to get a job, right, after that, and I wasn't going to stay in rural Iowa. As much fun as it was, once all of your friends leave, then it's a little bit different. I was a speechwriter the summer before my senior year for the U.S. Secretary of Education. I was an unpaid intern. And for what it's worth, to tie this all back together, the reason I was able to do that was because I'm not sure, Chris, do you know who helped manage Grinnell's endowment for a number of years?
I do not.
A gentleman by the name of Warren Buffett.
Oh, there you go.
Omaha's not far from Grinnell. And he was friends with one of our old trustees. So Grinnell, tiny little Grinnell, when I went there, 1,200 kids, 1,300 kids, we had over $2 billion in our endowment. There's a lot of money sloshing around. So they said, go out and get an internship that is amazing, but tell them you'll do it for free and we'll pay you to do it. So the Department of Education wasn't handing these out, but I called them and I said, hey, I can do this and work for free. And so they took me. So my first day on the job, I have to transcribe a speech that the president at the time, and this was 2003, so it was President Bush, gave at a school in Washington, D.C., a charter school it was the lowest income school in the district, and they had the highest test scores, including, with the Northwest schools. And I remember thinking, wow, that's something. So I applied to that school out of college, right? Had a phone interview, got turned down. Had a second phone interview, and it seemed like the principal didn't realize that she had interviewed me before and got turned down. She called a third time, and I just said, you know what, I'll just come out and I'll be there tomorrow. So this is my senior year. I had saved up enough money. I bought a ticket from Cedar Rapids, Iowa to get to D.C., and she was so impressed that I showed up the next day. She gave me the job. It was a terrible job for me. I was the music teacher the first year. Kids actively got dumber in music, I can guarantee that. But it was more about just kind of proving my mettle, and I got hired.
How long were you at the school teaching?
5 years.
And did eventually you move into teaching English?
On the second year. There was an understanding that this was like a prove it. Everybody else at the school did Teach for America. I was the only one who didn't. So I had to prove myself first. And I didn't do great, but I survived.
And at any point, because, this has come up a couple of times on the show, people who are in education, at some point, they start to look at their own investments, in part because they think, well, if I'm going to be a teacher all these years, I'm not going to be making tons of money. So therefore, is it when you're working in DC that you start to look at investing?
A little bit. And honestly, most of that happened because I had friends from college who were in the finance industry. And I remember one of them was visiting once, and they stayed with she was my girlfriend at the time, my wife now, and said, how much do you put in your Roth? And I was like, what is a Roth? I have no idea what that means. And my wife looked pretty concerned because she did know what it meant. And she was like, okay, we've got some work to do here. But it really started after we retired from teaching, maybe a little bit in there too, because I would go to our school happy hours and Tim Hansen was there. And I would see ads for the service that he ran at the Motley Fool pop up on my browser sometimes. And I would say, I wonder what it is he does.
You mentioned your wife. What did she do, and how much did the two of you talk about money before you got married?
So she was also a teacher. She ran a nonprofit in DC for a number of years, but then she went back to teaching as well. We both had a very similar approach, which I would say as I get older and I look at myself and I look at other marriages, I realize what an enormously lucky thing it is for both of us that we're very much on the same page, which is live well below your means and, maximizing our net worth is not the number one goal.
So I don't want to get overly personal, but to the extent that you're comfortable sharing this, how does the topic come up of, hey, honey, you know what we should do? We should quit our jobs and move to Costa Rica.
No, it's okay. The topic came up because, so the school I was at went for the kids from 7:30 to 5 every day. There was school on Saturday. There was mandatory school during the summer. That's a lot. And it was exhausting. So when I stopped at 5 years, I was the most tenured in the system. Now, there were others that had moved on to become principals, vice principals. That I thought that was something I'd want to get into, but it wasn't. And so we were both just exhausted, just utterly exhausted. And we said, we need to take time off. And my wife just kind of randomly, I still remember it to this day, she said, because we did a great job saving. We were very good at that. But she said, we don't have to be in the States. We could go somewhere else. And it was just like a little seed she planted. I didn't even respond to it, but it stayed and it growed and it growed. And so, eventually we were like, let's do this. We don't have kids. We've saved a pretty good chunk of money because we weren't doing anything with it other than paying our rent. And we were like, let's do it. This is going to be like our adventure. We'll move to Costa Rica for a year, and then we'll figure out what the next step is, which we assumed was just go back to teaching, but at schools that were more traditional.
And that's where we were talking about this before I hit record. We were talking about the idea that it's not even the idea, the reality that you can get bored when you retire. So it's down in Costa Rica that you start to get bored, and that's where you start digging in further to investing?
I don't think that bored is a powerful enough word. Now, at the time, I was just 29. I would say existential dread might be a better word, where it was one of those things where, I was in a beautiful place and that's great, but I had no purpose at all. And investing was something that was interesting. Like as I said, I was never, ever involved in it. And, David Gardner, he takes a very unusual, unorthodox approach to thinking about investing and kind of getting back to that Grinnell basketball. I loved how they thought about basketball differently. And when I read David, I saw a different way of thinking about not just investing, but money in general.
Look, I know you're busy and you're not spending all day watching the stock market. I don't either, but at the end of the day, I still want to get caught up on what happened. That's why I read Brew Markets. It is the free daily post-market email from Morning Brew. It hits your inbox right after the closing bell and tells you not just what happened on Wall Street, but what you can actually do with that information. I love it because it cuts through all the noise with clear, timely insight on the biggest stories moving stocks, from AI and earnings to tariffs, international drama, and it's all written by people who know the markets. And it's free. Just go to brewmarkets.com/money to sign up. There's a ton of stock market coverage out there, and a lot of it is either too dry, too shallow, or flat out too late. Brew Markets is timely, free, genuinely useful, and written with their signature sense of humor, the kind that makes a dense market day easier to digest. If you want a smarter wrap-up of the day in the markets, one that respects your time and also sharpens your thinking, sign up for Brew Markets. It is a must-read and it's free. Go to brewmarkets.com/money and sign up today. All right, let's get back to Brian. At what point do you start to think to yourself, this isn't just interesting, this isn't just potentially lucrative on a personal level, I think this is what I'm going to do instead of going back to teaching?
Well, I don't think it was ever that, but what I do think was there wasn't a one moment, to put it succinctly. There was a position open for a contract writer at the Motley Fool. Now, I was a writing teacher too. So this was like the overlap of where I did have some background. So I applied and I interviewed with, this will mean nothing to your readers or listeners, but I interviewed with Julie Clarenbach, and she was wonderful. And she said, we need to clean up your background knowledge, which I think was a complete understatement. But she was like, but you have the writing talent to do this. And so I think I got paid like $35 an article when I started, which was great down in Costa Rica in 2010. And so it was like that. Like it slowly started snowballing and I liked it and I was learning and I was getting good responses. And then there came this opening to get further training at the Motley Fool, like headquarters. And they said it can be remote. And then I said to my wife, I was like, it can be remote. So we can come back to Costa Rica whenever we want. We're not tied anywhere ever again. And Chris, it's 2026. We still go back to Costa Rica every winter. So that's how it happened. That's the genesis of it all.
Before we go to the speed round, when I had your partner in crime, Brian Feraldi, on the show, we talked about Charlie Munger and his effect on Feraldi as an investor. And I know for you, I mean, you mentioned David Gardner, you mentioned Buffett, but I also know for you, Nassim Taleb is someone who has had an impact on your investing philosophy. And I'm just wondering if you can share a little bit about how Nassim Taleb has influenced your investing, and in particular, the types of businesses that you look for.
Yeah. Someone that I know you've interviewed before as well. We both had chances to interview him.
It is a top 5 memorable interview, is sitting down across the table from Nassim Taleb, who is not a big person physically, but is someone who I found very intimidating.
Oh, yeah. He's a giant. And he doesn't care. He was also the most graceful, wonderful person the 2 times that I talked to him. So I know that there's a lot of ways that he can come off, especially on social media, but it was wonderful. Anyway, 2 things. One, when he wrote his book called Anti-Fragile, he said, most people in the world split things into things that are fragile or break easily under pressure and things that are robust, things that don't break under pressure. And what he said was, there's this 3rd category that nobody talks about, the anti-fragile, things that actually get stronger when exposed to stress. And that was just like a light bulb went off when I read that. And I was like, of course. And he uses our immune system and our muscles. And the thing that I loved about it, so to kind of frame it, the reason that I couldn't go on teaching at the school that I was at was because the stress was so high and so consistent that it was breaking down my systems. And if you read Anti-Fragile, the thing that really hits home is it's got to be the right kind of stress. And I like to say it's like acute stress and then lots of rest. And I loved thinking about that and applying it to my own life because it restored a little bit of balance to it. But when I talk about investing, what it really did was it made me focus on companies that take lots of small bets and then can double down on the ones that work. And obviously, I think Amazon, there's no better example than Amazon. People make fun of them for the Fire Phone. There are lots of other Fire Phones that were probably even bigger disasters for them. But if they didn't take all of those risks, then we wouldn't have AWS. Then we wouldn't have, Leo is getting started and it's going to transmit internet to places throughout the world. In fact, I think Delta just signed up to get their Wi-Fi from their satellite system. So that's the first thing. And then the other thing I'll say is this, and Chris, I think you might find this really interesting. Nassim Taleb is big on skin in the game. He says, you shouldn't be giving opinions on anything unless you can suffer for being wrong. And so when I read that, what I did was I went back and I looked. So I read this in like 2018. I've been writing for the Motley Fool for, let's say, 7 years. And I went back and I just coded 300 articles that I had written. And I put them in 2 buckets. One is writing positively about a company that I don't own and writing positively about a company that I do own. And I looked at how did those stocks perform over the next 3 years? And it was amazing. The ones that I wrote positively about that I did not own underperformed the market by a wide margin. The ones that I wrote positively about and I did own outperformed the market. And I was just like, if that's not a signal of what a huge difference it makes to have your skin in the game, I don't know what is. So that was the other huge kind of aha moment for me.
Let's go to the speed round. What is a thing you've bought that makes you happy?
It's not a thing, but we redid our kitchen. We live in a 20s duplex that we've converted to a single family home. And our kitchen was like 100 square feet. It was long and it was very expensive and it was worth every penny.
Yeah, that is the other thing about home renovations. That they take longer than you expect. They cost more than you want. But when they're done, you're pretty happy you did them.
Yep.
Have you ever made a purchase in your adult life that you regret and sometimes you still think about it?
When I was in my first year teaching, through a friend of a friend, I got a financial advisor who sold me on whole life insurance. And I thought I was the smartest guy in the world. I really did. I went and I talked to her. I just bought whole life. Yeah, that's me. And finally, someone took me aside and was like, I wouldn't be brag. This is not the brag that you think it is.
This is not the flex you think it is.
No.
What's the last thing you splurged on just for yourself?
We just went to New York City over spring break, and I bought a new pair of tennis shoes because I knew I was going to be walking around a bunch, and they were expensive, but they were worth it. My feet and my back were very happy.
Yeah, you got to splurge on particularly as you get older. You got to splurge on stuff like that. What is something about money that you wish you knew earlier in life?
You see, this is what I wish I knew when I was in high school, that I was afraid of thinking that that money is what gets you all the things that make life worth living. That thinking that was a problem. And I was right. I do think that's a problem, to think getting money, that will bring all the good things into your life. Because I think all the good things have nothing to do with money. Where I was wrong was that money can eliminate everything that gets in the way of pursuing the important things in life. And that I did not appreciate.
What is a charitable cause that you like to support?
What my wife and I tend to do is, there aren't huge causes. And again, so she ran a nonprofit for a number of years, which is why we don't give to traditional nonprofits, because she is very familiar with how that can work. So we like to pick out causes related to education in Milwaukee where we will find ways to make the kind of charitable donations that you don't get to write off. We'll put it that way.
Do you have a favorite movie or TV series that has money as a through line?
Not really, but I do love The Big Short. I just think that was such a great movie. And since I wasn't really involved in finance, but I lived in DC when all of that happened, it was fascinating to watch the movie and be like, oh, this is what everybody was freaking out about while I was teaching.
Did you read the book before the movie came out?
No.
I just remember reading the book because I was getting ready to interview Michael Lewis about the book. And I just remember thinking, some of the characters, and characters, they're real people, but I just thought, boy, some of the people in this book are so colorful and interesting. They would make for really interesting characters in a movie. I just can't imagine you could actually make a movie out of this.
But they did, and they did a great job.
Did a great job. Last thing is a penny for your thoughts, and this is just any sort of wisdom you've picked up along the way that you want to share with people who are listening. And it doesn't have to be about money. It can be about anything.
Oh, boy. So I would say don't fight the universe. And here's what I mean on that. I really was very drawn to learning about stocks and finance once I started doing that in Costa Rica. But I fought against that very hard because it was so against the identity that I had built for myself. I'm glad I broke through that. But you can use this in investing too. If you really believe in a company and year after year after year after year, it's not doing so hot. Don't fight the universe, because you might be right 1 time out of 10, but 9 times out of 10, you're not going to be.
There you go. You can hear more from Brian on YouTube and on his company website, longtermmindset.co. The link is in the show notes. I'm Chris Hill. Thanks for listening. I'll see you next week.